May I request you all to keep your phones on silent mode? Each speaker in the session would have about 15 minutes to make their presentation. Now, please join me in welcoming the distinguished panelist of the session. Please put your hands together as I welcome on stage the chairperson of the session, Joint Secretary IPF, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Shri Baldeo Purushartha. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Also, I invite our distinguished speakers to join us. Deputy CEO, IIFCL Projects, Mr. Palash Srivastava. I also request Joint Secretary Economic Affairs Finance Department Government of Rajasthan, Shri Ashutosh Vajpeyi, to kindly join us on the stage. And I also invite the Senior Investment Officer IFC World Bank Group, Mr. Pankaj Sinha, to join us on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I call this session to order. We would require some silence in the hall. Thank you so much. We now begin with our plenary session. And may I introduce our chairperson of the session to the audience. Mr. Baldeo Purushartha holds postgraduate degree in history from University of Delhi. He joined the Indian Administrative Service in 2002. Before joining as Joint Secretary Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, he served as Secretary Lokpal Divisional Commissioner, Jalandhar, Punjab. He's also served in various field and secretariat position in Government of Punjab and Government of India. With those words, very warm welcome to you, sir, and may I request you to kindly say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. This is my proud privilege indeed to address all of you on a topic which is very dear to me. In fact, this is my daily bread and butter. How to ensure private participation in infrastructure. And this is a topic which is not only important from investment point of view, but also important from the point of view of overall growth and development of the country. I don't know, many of you know that 1 rupee investment in infrastructure is having a very high multiplier effect. So some calculations are there that 1% increase in infrastructure investment as percentage of GDP, in short term, it can give you near 2.45 multiplier effect. And in longer term, probably it gives more multiplier effect than that. So this is an area where investment has a very high potential, not only in terms of opportunity, but also in terms of contribution to the growth and development of the country. Now, when we talk of private investment, private participation in infrastructure, there is a spectrum across which private participation is there. And private participation in everywhere. No infrastructure in this country is built without private participation. But if you put these things across the spectrum, what you will find that on the one extreme end, there are infrastructure initiatives, projects which are taken with the public expenditure, where the government is putting up the money and private sector is mainly coming up as a kind of contractor who provides the services, who built the infrastructure on behalf of government, provide the services and gets the money. So there is no risk involved or risk shared by the private sector participation. All risks are basically borne by the government. And then on the other extreme of the spectrum, there is pure private participation, where the entire infrastructure is built, operate, maintained by the private initiative. No risk of the government, no risk of the public, and they share everything. And in between that two extremes, there is a whole lot of PPP, a spectrum part, where both private and private are coming together, private and public are coming together in terms of sharing the risk, in terms of collaboration of efforts, in terms of building, constructing, developing and providing infrastructure services. So this is a very wide and very complex situation through which private participation is coming in the field of infrastructure. So I will not touch upon the two extremes. I will mainly touch upon the PPP part, because two extremes we all know, in some sectors, especially for example, telecom, etc., majority of development is happening with the private initiatives. And many other sectors like social sector, etc., where majority of development is happening with the public expenditure, where it is water supply, it is electricity, it is solid waste management, anything like that is mainly with the public health and education, mainly with the public expenditure. But in between these two extremes, the PPP part is there, and for which Government of India is taking up a lot of initiatives. It has taken up many initiatives. Many initiatives are in the pipeline, and I think this is the area which I find very, very potential enough to bring both public partner and private partner together for a better future of the country. If we see infrastructure, what is the infrastructure requirement of the country? Can anyone tell me the data, how much money we require for infrastructure development in the country? Any assessment? Or how much we are spending as a whole? See, generally, we are spending around 8% of the GDP in infrastructure, 5.5% as government expenditure, 2.5% about private expenditure. Coming together, roughly it is around 8% of the GDP is spent on infrastructure. But if we want to become a developed country, say by 2047, we have to consistently increase it somewhere around 12%. That is one sort of data which we are getting. The other sort of data is if we calculate the fixed capital formation ratio, and that includes only the non-food subsidy capital part of thing. There, from existing say 20 odd percent, 22%, we have to move about 24% and plus, maybe little more. There are some calculations done by say World Bank which says that 70% of the urban infrastructure is yet to build. Our own national infrastructure pipeline comes around somewhere 20 to 25 lakh crore investment every year. You take this data or that data. The main idea is that it gives you an idea of how much investment is required into infrastructure. And in a nutshell, it can be said that we require to invest a lot. Now, from where it will come in? Currently, our PPP share in NIP is roughly around 15%. And we want to get the real outcome of the NIP, this has to be improved and increased up to say 30%, 35% of the NIP required in investment. But how to do it? What are the challenges which are there in promoting PPP? Why we are not achieving the kind of thing we want to achieve? So there are some of the things which we have found out, and this is nothing rocket science. This we have found out on the basis of continuous interaction with the stakeholders like you. One of the major challenges that in infrastructure project, MOSFI has taken up a sample survey of infrastructure projects to find out which are the two factors which are delaying the projects. Any guess? Any guess which are the two bigger factors which are delaying infrastructure projects. Okay. And another? Wow. Good. What is your name? Thank you. So, yes, you are absolutely right. So, the biggest problem is land acquisition. 27% of infrastructure projects are delayed because there is some problem somewhere in land acquisition. Land is either not coming in time, it is getting delayed. Maybe we have acquired 90% of land, but rest 5-10% is not getting acquired. So it's a big problem. And if land is not being given in time to the private concessionaire, his cost of project is going up. And secondly, clearances. 22% of the projects are getting delayed because of clearances not coming in time. So somewhere some authority is not giving clearance, or some clearance is also because we need to take a lot of clearances. And in addition to that, there are many other problems. For example, the cost of capital is little higher in our country. Still, infrastructure sector is not getting the adequate capital. Palash is here and he is into this business. But still, infrastructure project in our country is not getting cheap and long-term capital. This is one of the requirement of infrastructure project. By very nature, infrastructure projects are long-term initiatives. So you require cheap and long-term patient capital for infrastructure. Then many projects are not self-sufficient or sustainable because of variety of reasons. For example, user charges. You cannot increase user charges beyond a reasonable limit because we are, after all, in a democracy. You cannot make user charges so high that a large number of our public is unable to use that infrastructure. And this is more true in terms of social infrastructure. If water charges, electricity charges, or other things which are essential for living, if their charges goes beyond reasonable limits, then it's very difficult that all section of society can enjoy the benefit of better infrastructure services. So that is one problem. Then in urban areas, the poor financial health of urban bodies is still a problem. Many of you might be knowing that India is growing very fast on urbanization count. And probably by 2030, more than 40% of our population would be in urban areas. By 2040, more than half of Indian population would be in urban areas. So we are going to become a urban country very fast. But the urban infrastructure and the capacity to create, maintain urban infrastructure is very poor. The financial health of urban local bodies is very poor to sustain infrastructure development. So these are a whole lot of problems. Now, what we have done to take care of some of these problems, and when I am saying that what we have done, I understand that it is not that we have solved all the problems. Probably it can never be solved. That is why it's a lock and key issue. You interact, you come up with some solution, you implement those solutions, some development happens, then newer kind of challenges come up, then again you address those challenges. So it's this spiral path. Now, what we have done, that first and foremost, we have created some policies to support PPP projects. Now, one of the challenge was that PPP project by nature is complex. You create a DPR, you create a concession agreement, you create some kind of document which is going to be a base document for next 30-40 years. It's a long-term contract. And it doesn't matter how capable a person is or an institution is, it's very difficult for him to gauge what will happen in next 30 years or what will happen in next 40 years. It is almost impossible task. So the agreement has to be as good as possible to ensure that very limited number of problems come up. This requires technical advisory services. This requires consultancy services. This requires capacity building enhancement. For that, we have come up with empaneled list of transaction advisors. 12 transaction advisors have been empaneled by us. Many cities, many states, many smaller government agencies were requesting us that even hiring technical advisor was taking them almost a year, because they have to bid it out. Sometimes it get success, sometimes it doesn't. So project is altogether a different thing. Even hiring a consultant, a technical advisor, was taking almost a year. So we have empaneled, and with that empaneled list, anyone can hire a technical advisor, say within 7 to 10 days. That is one thing. Second, as I have already said, that the capacity, financial capacity of many of urban bodies and other government organizations are not very high. So we try to give them some kind of financial support in hiring these transaction services. So we have come up with a scheme, India Infrastructure Development Scheme, funding scheme, under which we give up to 5 crore of project preparation funding for each project. So if a government agency comes to us and they say that we want to take up a PPP project, and for that they want to hire a transaction services or a consultancy, we can support them in that endeavor, so that a project is well structured, it become bankable, it become biddable. And this is very, very important thing, because if these things are not there inbuilt in the project from day one, then project is bound to fail somewhere in future. Either it will not bid it out, or after bidding it will fail. Then second initiative we have taken, that many of the PPP projects are not self-sustaining. They are economically required, but commercially unviable, because of the location, because of the nature of the project, because of the requirement that you cannot raise user charges beyond a particular reasonable limits. So we have come up with a viability gap funding scheme, under which we are supporting PPP projects by giving viability gap funding. And the viability gap funding percentage is quite high. So for economic sector scheme, we give up to 30% of the capex requirement. Sorry, 40% of the capex requirement. And in social sector projects, we are giving up to 80% of the capex requirement. General social sector scheme will get up to 60, but some special demonstration value pilot project kind of projects will get up to 80% of capex requirement. And in addition to that, we will also give them up to 50% of OPEX requirement for first 5 years. So these initiatives we have taken to promote PPP in those sectors where there were no takers. Traditionally, our PPP projects concentrate around roads, ports, energy, all traditional sectors. Then thirdly, we have a very good appraisal system, which is called PPPAC, PPP Appraisal Committee. That committee appraise all the central PPP projects beyond a threshold, just to bring a standardization, brings more sanctity, and to ensure that the project is more biddable and there are more chances of getting it successful. Then for making, helping project developers, investors, we have also taken a variety of initiatives which are mainly related to infrastructure financing. How to bring cheap and patient capital to infrastructure developers. So the one thing was promoting InvIT and REIT also. So as you might be aware, InvIT as a financial instrument came somewhere around 2012-13. But there was not much offtake of InvIT because of various issues. And in 2020, we made changes in various acts. 3 to 4 acts were amended to allow InvITs and REITs to borrow. Now, in addition to equity capital through unit sale, they can also borrow from the market, which was not earlier allowed. And not only borrowing, we have also requested insurance regulators and pension fund regulators to allow insurance and pension funds to invest in debt instruments of these REITs and InvITs. Then we have also made changes to allow FPIs to invest in InvITs. And we have also taken initiative in government to set up PSU InvITs, and two of the InvITs have done quite well, NHI InvIT and PGCIL InvIT. Both of them have raised more than probably 15,000 crore from market. In addition to that, we have also made many changes. For example, allowed 100% FDI in automated route in infrastructure sector. Majority of infrastructure sector can get 100% FDI in automated route. No need to take approval from anyone. We have given 100% tax exemption to sovereign wealth funds and pension funds on their income from investment in Indian infrastructure sector. So these are some of the things which we have done. In addition to that, a lot of other efforts have been taken. And two of the noteworthy initiative I would like to bring it to your notice. One is that setting up of a DFI, NAFED. There was a need which was felt by many that infrastructure sector should have its own dedicated financing institution, which can finance infrastructure as per requirement of the infrastructure sector. And there are a special requirement of infrastructure sector. So for that, we have set up a DFI in terms of NAFED with more than 100 lakh crore as capital. And this is going to be a sea change, bringing a sea changer. It's going to be a game changer as far as financing infrastructure is concerned. Which other, for example, IIFCL or NIIF or many other banks, they were doing in their own manner. But this is going to be a big initiative. Because traditionally, our infrastructure funding was mainly from banks. And one of the problem in bank finance to infrastructure is asset liability mismatch. To address that, these initiatives have been taken. Many more initiatives are in the pipeline. A lot of things are under discussion. And I think from private participation point of view, infrastructure sector is the sector which is going to provide a very positive and very high level of opportunity to any developer and investor who wants to make his investment. And for that, you need not be someone who is having a experience of infrastructure development. One of the good point of InvIT is that it separates technical requirement from financial requirement. You can come up as a simple investor who is going to invest in infrastructure sector by purchasing units of the InvIT, and the performance, actual management of the infrastructure asset can be done by a project manager. So that separation is there to attract those investors, including retail investors, who have money but do not have experience in investment in infrastructure. So thank you very much. I will stop here and will take question answer at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson of the session, for that wonderful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Mr. Palash Srivastava. And may I say a few words about him? He has about 26 years of experience in infrastructure transaction advisory, investment, public private partnership infrastructure management, consulting, and fundraising, capacity building, and training in India. He has worked on transaction in all core infrastructure sector. And with those words, we invite him to make his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, AIMA, for having me over here. And thank you, sir, Mr. Baldeo Purushartha, for setting the context and a lot of initiatives that have been under the aegis of DEA, which actually have kick-started and brought us where we are. We are acknowledged at least in three main sectors as being the world leaders and in PPPs and infrastructure. So some of the models have been sorted, some of the I would say funding gaps have been sorted, and we have a scalable say start, and we can really look at some sectors. I think we can look at a quite a heady start with lot of pension funds and InvITs as models to come. I am focusing on a challenging sector, which is the water sector. Urban sector was mentioned by Mr. Purusharth, and I would like to really acknowledge the fact that there have been efforts, and now this sector seems to be poised for great investments, and this is a very key sector. So let us see uh, what. So if we see that there are very say unique characteristics of water, it has no substitute. It is of course a monopoly like most infrastructure projects have, and there are of course, as Mr. Pusharth was again saying, that there are very little opportunities for us to actually enhance the tariffs. So I think that most of the government, most of the say water services are provided by the state governments or agencies reporting to the state governments, and capital investments till date are either the development agencies like the World Bank and other multilateral aid agencies, or budgetary support from central, and very little, revenue surplus here that we are talking of. Uh, and the service levels, if you see, we are at 64% as against close to about, even our peers. If you see, South Africa is doing better, Brazil is doing better. Duration, we on an average in our urban areas, and in rural areas we really kind of have now had some say initiative or distributing water, but in even in our urban areas it is from 1 to 6 hours as against Brazil and even Vietnam, which actually are close to about 24 hours. Per capita supply again is very low. You can see the difference. On an average, we need 140 LPCD liters per capita per day. Metering, we have our metering. We have now, I think, some of the major towns are well covered. However, our non-revenue water is actually quite high. If you see, one of the developed countries like Singapore is actually having very little non-revenue water, and transmission losses also are quite high here. And cost recovery, I think, if we look at, we are looking at roughly about 30 to 45% of the O&M cost, not the capital cost that we are really looking at. So these are very stark figures that we have, and with this, getting private sector into the equation is actually a problem. So ULBs face a vicious circle where they have poor revenue collection, poor O&M standards, then strain on finance for newer connections, low control on leakages and thefts, and poor perceived value of services. And there leads to low willingness to pay, and therefore again poor revenue collection. So this actually is the setting. And if we see that how PPP actually has moved across the past 2 decades, if we see that there are few signs of success that we are now seeing. Earlier attempts, whether it was trying for PPP projects in a few attempts actually succeeded in terms of getting some. In Karnataka towns, there was 24x7 that we had actually got in some sectors we were able to succeed. However, it was not able to be scaled up, but we now are seeing a number of initiatives which actually I'll be sharing some case studies also later in the presentation, where we have seen there is a lot of success. So if you see, this is a summary. I think there'll be some updates there, but if you see there are right now 3 operational PPP projects. However, there have been many which have been attempted. There are, if you see, a lot of PPP contracts have been tried on BOT, BOOT frameworks, and a lot of the say players are also international in this realm. So failed projects, if you see Pune, Hyderabad, Goa, Bangalore, most of the project components were bulk water treatment and distribution or bulk water supply. And the key factors for failure was bulk water tariff was unaffordable, credit quality of the water board or the urban local body in question was actually very low. Around 2000, we had uh, the treatment, design, construction, and O&M aspect. And then obviously there was the risk of bulk water availability was actually an important risk which we felt derailed the project, because the availability was then, even in Bangalore, where it was rehabilitation, distribution, and O&M and collection, project was abandoned after 2 international firms submitted their proposals. So, however, we have seen successful projects have also emerged. If we see, uh, Jasco Voltas Consortium actually did work in Salt Lake. Haldia also we saw there was success. Latur, Chandrapur, and also recently Nagpur. If we see, there has been a lot of success that we have seen. And here also, if we see that the designing of the concession framework was on a say, I think better. And we have also seen that even the National Mission Clean Ganga, the water treatment projects have actually, wastewater treatment projects have been taken up on HAM, which is again a changed modality and has succeeded. So the Hubli, Dharwad, Belgaum, Viola had come, distribution, design, construction, and O&M. These actually performance-based fee model for operator actually succeeded very well, and we have seen this actually getting scaled up even in Nagpur and also in Mysore. So this is, I think, what we have as far as the overall, experience of PPP projects in the water sector across the country. There are some which are right now on the annual, but look at the participation. The number of inquiries are very high. Look at Kolhapur, or look at Aurangabad. The number of inquiries actually for when the bids are actually awarded, being called for, they are very high, but the number of bidders actually fall the moment the bids are actually finally bid. And some of the major players, if you see in this segment, are been mentioned here. You see there are certain international firms as well. And the actually, if you see, the applications received are also in the range of 5 to 10, but financial bids actually are very low. So that actually creates a problem sometimes, a moral hazard, that how can we award a project for a single private sector partner. So I would say that we will see more firms bidding now that there is a lot of say interest in the water sector which is actually emerging. So the key issues that have uh, been highlighted are, say, the private sector is actually looked at for capital infusion, but this is, I think, an important thing, where we have hybrid structures now. So that actually will enable us to move forward. Profit motives of the private sector overrides the obviously social objective. sense of loss of control that the urban local body or the parastatal that is managing the water function feels, then there is a resistance to increase the tariff, and will the asset be handed back or after the contract period. So that all these are important things which one needs to understand. See, what happens is in the water sector, the all assets, unlike a power project or unlike a road project, in water sector all the assets are underground. And in India we have a very problematic situation because the assets have not been inventorized, have not been documented well. So that actually creates a certain kind of a let's say stress between the government entity and the private sector. So the models that have actually kind of now matured are that the private sector initially looks at some experience of managing that water asset. What are the pipelines which are, what are the say pumping say head which is actually required, and all this then after experience the private sector is able to confirm a reliable baseline and is able to then look at say operating or upgrading the network. So now if you see there is private sector feels there is a payment guarantee which is required because sometimes the payments from the municipality are not forthcoming. There are certain funds which have been created so that there is a security which is actually payment security which is enabled. The tariff risk of course remain. Unrealistic performance standards without assessing ground realities of course sometimes have cropped up. Now, so the approaches are that, as I was mentioning, PPPs in water sector need to be hybrid models, less focus on the typology, more focus on the tailored solutions and results. So you have government, basically you have the civil society and the developers, and the concerns that are addressed actually will lead to so what has actually happened. I'll just take a few case studies to illustrate. So distribution PPPs in Madhya Pradesh. So pilot zones in Bhopal, Gwalior, Indore identified for implementation through PPP. Estimated cost 45 crores. Scope was network improvement, connection replacement. You understand, this is the understanding of the network that a private sector is initially gaining. And the structure is like, you have the private operator operating it for 12 years. So network improvement, metering, O&M, collection and billing are part of the scope of work. And the municipal corporation actually pays through an escrow account to the operator, and the performance is monitored by a third party auditor which has been appointed by the municipal corporation. Now the payment mechanism is fixed payment is 50% and 50% is performance payment. So in case there is there are parameters which are there which actually on the basis of the performance payment is released to the private sector partner, and on a fixed payment these are released on quarterly basis, or to be basically the performance payments are made on a half yearly basis. So the tariff is delinked from the operator scope of work in this. So payment is on annuity model and fixed and performance basis as we just saw, and there is an escrow account to guarantee payment. So that is a payment security that actually happens. And then there are Government of Madhya Pradesh has assigned municipal employees, municipal corporation employees to the private operator to help in management of the assets, the water assets. And then billing and collection activities are to be carried out on behalf of, because this was also an initial resistance which was actually seen in the say Madhya Pradesh projects, that people were not willing to actually get metering done through the private sector agency. So therefore, this say joint working was actually has improved the performance. Then performance incentives were also included in the contract, and PPP steering committee was set up for monitoring of the project. So NMCG, National Mission Clean Ganga, wastewater treatment, so they've been done on HAM basis, so hybrid annuity model. So an SPV is proposed, is actually implemented. 15 to 20 years concession is there, and construction support of 40% is given. And then this is the scope is responsibility of the contractor is financing, construction, operation, and maintenance of treatment plants. So this also basically got support from the state governments, ULBs, for necessary delegations. But definitely, as again was mentioned earlier, that clearances actually remained a big challenge. Land acquisition, of course, was basically enabled. Here, land acquisition does not become a major stumbling block, unlike roads, because here land is available close to the water body where the sewerage is to be treated. So if you see, this is the construction phase and the O&M phase, and how the annuities are paid. And this is the escrow mechanism where NMCG actually is paying and releasing payments to the developer. Latur water supply system, if you see, so it was it was the first integrated water supply and distribution management contract. So it included treatment. So Maharashtra Jeevan MJP and Latur Water Management Company actually signed a contract in 2006. It is still actually working fine. But initially, they actually there was an stiff public resistance, and was actually situation from zero billing to 100% billing and collection. However, when the contract was signed, MGAP was not able to meet the condition precedent, but eventually was able to carry the project through. In Naya Raipur, if you see bulk water supply system, so this is also something which is a project of 150 crores, project being funded with financial assistance under the JNNURM scheme. And of course, the role of the concessionaire included water treatment, bulk water supply and treatment. And the supply of treated water was actually to be made in surface reservoirs which were in Naya Raipur town, and then collection of charges from the consumers, which were bulk consumers, and O&M of the facilities for concession. So this was basically the role, and the NRDA, which is the Naya Raipur Development Authority, was to provide land and ROW and pay power charges and reimburse cost towards chemicals and other consumables. And also there was there were a set of say concessions which were provided to the concessionaire, that there was non-disconnection of say connections by NRDA. There was water shortage, and there was inability of NRDA to actually construct. So this actually project did not work very well. Yeah, okay. So I think I'll skip the Karnataka model, and I'll come to the Nagpur model, where in say January 2008 PPP model was actually say initiated, and in phase 1 water audit, leak detection study, and assessment of economic optimum volume of water loss and performance indicators was done through water and energy audit study. And then Dharmpet zone of 15,000 connections was selected, and full intervention in phase 3 using apparent commercial and real loss reduction methods was implemented. and ongoing maintenance and loss control mechanism by implementation of 24 cross 7 water supply on a PPP basis. So if we see that this is the comparison between Nagpur and Latur cases. So if you see, the strategy was that we had water sector reforms, basically including water efficiency projects under JNNUREM grants, and which were actually merged together with this program, and this resulted actually in say certain amount of unsatisfied demand and poor cost recovery, and the augmentation led to strain on water resources and additional capital funding through commercial sources, and financial burden again on the Nagpur Municipal Corporation, leading to mismatch, increasing needs and decreasing water resources. So now it was before, if you see water JNNURM, the system efficiency was 32%, annual loss was 56 crores. With depreciation, it actually climbed up to 75 crores. And I'll just come to what with tariff revision, actually things improved. However, there was a problem that there was indexation was not initiated. So while Nagpur met with some success, but we also there is a lot which needs to be done. So I think this is an overview of the water sector, which I think will provide you with the challenges that the infrastructure sector still faces in some of the sectors. And of course, there is city gas distribution and hospitals, healthcare, education, where there is a lot of new models which are happening and getting streamlined. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, our next distinguished speaker is Shri Ashutosh Vajpeyi. Ashutosh Vajpeyi ji is currently working as the Joint Secretary Economic Affairs with the Government of Rajasthan, and also deals with entirely externally assisted project approvals in the state. May we welcome Shri Ashutosh with those words.
Good afternoon, everyone. The context for this session has already been well set by our chairman, sir. And you must have seen so many interesting case studies where the public and private partnership engagements have given good results. In some of the cases, some are the mixed results. And for me, it is a time to share some of the experiences at subnational levels in India, and in particular reference to the state of Rajasthan. The public investment management, or we say the private investment in public sector. So we have to understand one very important aspect, that what is the terminology, that private investment, ultimately it's an investment. So every investment needs a return on investment. It's so simple. So whenever the private investment comes to any sector, maybe infrastructure or socio-economic sector, it has to give a return on investment. Then who gives the return? So you and me, all people of India, we give the return either directly to the private investor or through the government. Whatever the case may be, the return is given by you and me. The new modalities which have come up over the years as public private partnership, there are various models available. you name it, boot, and so many. There are so many terminologies and so many models are in work today. Hybrid annuity model. All of these models have been worked out, tested, and they are still going on at various levels. But the issue is whether the private investment is really coming the way we anticipate it. Our experience goes a little on a different path. Way back about around 8 or 9 years back in Rajasthan, we started looking for private sector investment through PPP projects in various initiatives. And one of the great experience came up with the state highway project with the Public Works Department. So we came up with financing from the World Bank and ADB, and we were looking for many roads with to be built to be constructed with the public-private partnerships. So in the overall design of the project, we had a substantial part dedicated to PPP contracts. For a couple of years, there was no player. We did not get any, despite best efforts, no proposal, no investor, no developer, no lender was interested to come in the state and to work with us. So we came to Delhi. We organized various seminars and we kind of advertised ourselves that please come to Rajasthan and invest. Even then, our experience did not give us any positive result. That was the time we were trying in many sector like water sector, we were trying in education sector, we were trying in medical and health sector. Some of the investors came for medical sector and education. Few schools were taken, few PHCs were taken, but that was not a very encouraging experience. So that gave us a reason that why such things are happening, why people are not interested to work at subnational level in the way they might be interested to work at the national level. So we approached Government of India, the Public Private Partnership unit in the Finance Ministry. We tried to study various modalities, how we can improve the things. After that, we started looking internationally as well. Many of the country models we studied. You name the country, probably we have studied the model. World Bank Public Investment Management System also was suggested to us. IMF system was also suggested to us. Then various other models, OECD models, European markets. Then it started giving us one such feeling that they all are models. You adopt one model, it can be successful at one particular place, it may not be replicable at another place. You may be running good ham project in one place, but it may not be that kind of success in another place. Because annuity models are again fiscal structures to be designed because it has to be repaid. It may not be repaid as on today, but it has to be repaid with interest after certain time. So we came up with this result that there has to be some system for this. There has to be some framework. If a solid framework is in existence, probably the confidence and trust of the private investor will be increased, and with that confidence he will enter for his prospective market where he is almost assured for a return on investment. So we designed a different approach because we could not take any direct approach which are applicable at the national level, union level, or any other country level. we had to be contextualized in local terms. That is, a typical sub-national model has to be designed. Of course, there is no union level model also available, but at the same time, there is no sub-national model is available. So we took up this task that we should come up with a new framework, which we coined the name as Public Investment Management Framework. So currently we are working on the framework. In this framework, we had designed an interlinkage of two different domains. It's not only infrastructure domain, because infrastructure is one of the major aspect where investments are needed. But at the same time, there are various socio-economic projects and schemes which directly may not be related to infrastructure, but indirectly and over the time they require some kind of infrastructure as well. So those interlinking was very much essential. So we designed two components. One is handling private investment or public investment, as the case may be, in socio-economic sector. At the same time, private or public investment in the infrastructure development sector. Then we started working on it and we observed that there is a big missing link in the entire system, and that was there was no direct linkage with our budget making, budget preparation and budgetary processes. So that once we spotted out that missing link, we started mapping out the entire spectrum. Now we have completed the entire spectrum of the how this should be linked with the budgetary system, where at what stage what action is required, what stage what approvals would be required, where the time is taking into consideration. There are delays in approvals, how the delays in approvals could be minimized, what effort should be done, how the appraisal should be done, what are the techniques of appraisal of any project or any proposal which is coming on the table should be done in an efficient and faster manner. So these are the some of the technicalities we worked with. Then we also came to know that capacity another is a big issue. We can design any system, but we have to enable our workforce to come up to that standard, so that whatever we are planning, that the time limit should be fixed, there should be faster approvals, there should be faster appraisals, everything should be done in a timely manner, because in India we have an annual budget cycle. So if anything takes more than a year, it obviously goes into the next budgetary cycle or next to the next budgetary cycle. And that is where the problem was. In our budgets, some estimations are kept because the project has been conceptualized, but it has not been finalized. And that creates problems in years to come. When you have started the project, you need 500 crores or 300 crores in your budget. You come to the finance ministry and finance department, they say, sorry, we can only give you 200 crores. And that is also a pain point for an execution point of view. So we have started doing all these modalities, not only for infrastructure sector, but for socio-economic sector as well. Whenever you are designing a scheme or you're designing a project, how it should be dealt with, what are the stages, and that's how the entire framework has been designed. Then the question comes, you may design the framework, but what will you do with the documentation? So we started examining various documents and various kind of details, guidelines available nationally as well with other state governments. For example, the Model Concession Agreement, which is designed by Haldia Committee, we came to know that although we adopted the same MCA, but when we started working on it, we found that it's not too much convenient for any state government. It's good at the national level. It may be good for NHAI, but it's not that convenient for us to work with. So now we are also designing our own MCA. We are designing our own documents wherever we find that something new which is suitable for the subnational governments should be done, that we are taking into consideration along with the concurrently happening capacity development. So that's how we are naming it Public Investment Management Framework. Once it is ready, maybe in a few months' time, it will be ready and we will share with all the states as well as the union level to get their feedback also. And I'm very much sure that once we design this framework, this will be the first of its kind in the country. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. I'm just sharing this idea with you that this is the new initiative to bring more private investment, more efficient private investment into the state level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. May I now invite our next speaker, Shri Pankaj Sinha, to make his presentation. Shri Pankaj Sinha is a graduate engineer and an MBA with over 27 years of experience in the infrastructure sector with specific focus on PPPs for last 15 years. He has successfully led several PPP transactions in sectors such as the urban transport infrastructure, solar, health, mining, and water. He has worked in several states of India as well as in other countries such as Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. With those words, may I invite Senior Investment Officer, International Finance Corporation, World Bank Group, Shri Pankaj Sinha, to make his presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get into the main part of the presentation, which is sharing IFC experience in structuring bankable PPPs, allow me to share a few minutes, a few slides on talking about our organization. So, as ma'am said, we are part of the World Bank Group. IFC basically provides a solution to promote private sector investment. And normally we have two instruments. One is making direct equity and debt investments in the private sector. Plus, we also provide advice to enable private sector investment. And one of the advice that we provide is PPP transaction advisory. I represent that unit of IFC. So globally, we have done so far in last 20 years about 64 projects that has been successfully closed, which basically means that the commercial closure has been achieved and PPP partner has been identified and they have signed an agreement, which has mobilized more than $40 billion of investment across sectors. You can see we have done projects in health, power, water, transport, as well as in ICT. In India also, we have done in last 14 years about 27 projects all over the country in different sectors, mainly in solar, urban, and health sector. Now, let's get into the main point, which is how to structure bankable PPP projects. I was hearing when the chair was speaking that what are the key issues in doing infrastructure project. There were two issues which were mentioned. Land acquisition and clearances. There is a third issue, which is lack of prepared projects. Project has to be prepared, and preparation doesn't mean just preparing a small feasibility study. It has to be thoroughly analyzed, and the preparation has to be done up to the stage of bankability. I'll get into that. But as many of you would know, a PPP is basically a long-term contract between a private partner and public sector for providing public asset or service in which private partner bears significant risk. Now, this is very important PPP will be a project will be defined as a PPP only when private sector takes a significant capital risk as well as O&M risk, and where their payments or remuneration are linked to the performance. Now, there are many advantages of PPP. I'll not get into those details, but one of the major objective of PPP is to access wider sources of financing. Again, as it was said in the beginning, the needs of investment in infrastructure is huge, and it cannot be met by only public sector financing. You have to go to private sector, and the moment private capital comes in equation, you have to be really thorough in the preparation. A private partner is not going to invest a penny unless until all the risks are thoroughly scrutinized and properly allocated. If you see a typical PPP structure, and that's how I would like to explain the bankability concept. I mean, there is a government authority which signs a PPP agreement, which is typically called as concession agreement, with the project SPV. And then that the project SPV is responsible for design, finance, build, operate, maintain, all the infrastructure project. And then there are different users. Now, if you see the left-hand side, the commercial lenders and the sponsor consortium, they are providing debt and equity to the SPV. Now, this is the end result of bankability. So bankability is something which refers to the ability of the project to raise financing, both as equity and debt. And this will be done only through appropriate risk structuring, which basically involves you have to identify all the risk involved in the project, and then you have to allocate them also. And all these risk allocation gets defined legally in a document called concession agreement. So this is the concession agreement that whether it is a 15-year concession agreement or 25-year concession agreement will be bankable, which basically means if you go to the investor, they will be giving money only when all these issues have been properly analyzed. And while the end result is getting money, but then you see every arrow which is being shown here can spoil your bankability. So I'll just give you one example. Right now, we are doing a water supply project, a wastewater project in Bangladesh. But the issues are similar in India also. And we are struggling to explain to the client, the authority, which is who we are advising, that why a wastewater project in brownfield setting cannot be done on pure boot model. Here, government has to take the risk of providing annuity. So a private sector cannot go to a household and say that now I am providing you a network and now you will be paying this the whole user charges, because first the tariff, the cost reflective tariff will be very high, which cannot be politically accepted. Second, the enforcement risk is with the government. So it has to be it has to be understood that different projects require different kind of structuring. In some projects, such projects are amenable where you can collect the full cost recovery tariff from users, maybe in the power sector or maybe in some cases in the road sector. But in many sectors like water or wastewater, government has to come in with some annuity. So these are different parts of structuring. But then if it is not properly allocated, and if sometimes government insists that no, we will not like to provide any support, private sector should take the risk, they should put the network and collect the tariff, then such projects don't reach closure. And that applies to other issues also. Now let's get into the drivers that we consider while structuring a project. There are 4 such key drivers that we consider when we advise our client on structuring a project. First is that what is the fiscal impact on the government by doing this project, whether it is sustainable for the government or not. Then we have to also see the affordability by users. I mean, if we are doing a water project, then we have to keep in mind that we cannot assume that a user, a household, will be paying the full cost recovery, because that will be too high. And though in the beginning client may say that no, we will impose a very cost reflective tariff, but politically it is not going to happen. So sometimes we have to insist on that. No, you have to provide some annuity or some support, VGF. Then how to define the quality of product or service, which is very important, because in PPP, the focus should be on outcome. So if you are doing a power project on PPP, then the focus for the government should be on the outcome, that how much kilowatt hour of power I am getting. instead of focusing into what is going to be the specification of transformer, what is going to be the specification of the conductors, or what will be the route of network and all those things. I mean, though you can high level specifications can be defined, but then the design should be left to the private sector so that they can deliver the outcome, which in this case is kilowatt hour. Similar thing applies to other sectors also. And the last is whether the project is financially viable for the private operator. Now, that viability can come with some VGF, which basically means some grant support or government support, or it can be directly financially viable, where there can be a project where private sector can fully recover its cost. Now, these are some of the issues that we have to consider while structuring a bankable PPP. And let me tell you, this is not a comprehensive list. There are many sectors, but I have just tried to give you a snapshot of the issues. If you see the technical side, you can imagine any sector. I don't need to take any name, but any sector, we have to first understand the demand analysis. And let me clarify that even projects which are based on annuity, demand has to be analyzed, because sometimes what happens, I'll give you an example of transmission sector project. Now, in transmission sector, power transmission sector projects, normally it is done on annuity model. So private sector builds the line and then they get paid by the power utility of the state. But unless until there is a demand, even if you start structuring the project will not reach the closure unless until there is a clear sight that yes, the downstream user or the upstream generation plants are going to be ready by the time line is ready. Because even if you construct a line, government is not going to pay unless until they see that this power will be utilized. So you have to be careful whether it is a annuity based projects or cost recovery based projects. Demand should be properly analyzed and projects should not be over designed, because you may succeed in reaching commercial close, you may even succeed in I may say fooling the market and getting the tenders also, but finally when it comes to the bank, the final scrutiny happens when whether you can get the money from bank or not. That is the final test of the whether a project has been successfully structured or not. If a bank is willing to give you money, that means that your 95% of the risks have been structured. There are still issues even after getting money, project gets stuck, but those are separate. But most of the issues are examined at that stage. Site selection, land acquisition, what are going to be your input process standards. So all these issues have to be thoroughly analyzed in the due diligence stage, and then we have to identify all the risks. Similarly, if we talk about commercial or financial side, I mean, off-taker is the most important case, that who is going to take your service or who is going to buy your product, and whether that off-taker is willing to buy, and whether they are willing to pay for that service, how much they are willing to pay. So all those issues have to be structured. If a project involves a VGF, then we have to also see whether cost benefit analysis has been done or not, whether it is okay for government to go for PPP or conventional EPC mode. Payment security is another very important factor that we have to consider, because in many projects where government payments are involved, payment security is a very common thing, because many of the projects, many of the government authorities, particularly if we are doing urban projects where we are dealing with municipal corporation or urban local bodies, they are not credit worthy. And one of the common issue that we face, and that takes a lot of time in finalizing the structure, that there is a strong reluctance from these ULBs that they don't want to give any payment assurance like escrow or letter of credit, or in some cases even sovereign guarantee or sub-sovereign guarantee is required, because normally they say that we are government, if we are signing a contract, private sector to trust, but it doesn't work like that. You will not get financing unless until your payments are secured, and that is a genuine issue. Nobody says that government never pays, but there is a delay. So if you are saying in the contract that I will pay, make the necessary payment in 45 days, if you didn't pay in 45 days, then there are issues. Then that creates issue for the lenders. So payment security is an important, and depending upon the project, we spend a lot of time in creating appropriate payment security mechanism. Bid parameter is another important issue, how you define the bid parameter. Bid packaging is also in cases where projects are to be done over the whole state. Suppose you want to develop 10 hospitals in 10 districts of Maharashtra, whether you want to give to one developer or you want to divide into 2 or 3 packages, because that diversifies your implementation risk and that also increases the bankability. Credit worthiness, that we have seen that, if you are working with, let's say, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, then we have to see the credit worthiness of AMC. Many municipal corporations are not credit rated, but those who are rated, they get easily such projects closed. So these are some of the issues that we consider while structuring the project. So it takes about at least 9 months to 12 months. So while we talk very easily that we have to talk about bankability, but it takes a lot of time to understand. Sometimes we face this criticism from our client that we are taking a lot of time, but this is important, because if you don't analyze all these issues, then you will get stuck. As Mr. Srivastava was telling, that in many cases we get only 1 or 2 bids at a financial bid opening stage. The main reason is that there are certain risks which are not perceived to be properly allocated by the private sector, and that's why many people refuse to participate in the bidding process. And if the competition is low, the value for money for government would be lower. So how we normally approach in IFC? Normally, we advise our projects in 2 phases. In phase one, we do proper due diligence and transaction structuring. Sometimes we face pressure from the client that, you directly get into the tendering stage. We have elections in 2 months' time, so let's go to the election. We put a strong resistance to that. We insist that no, it requires at least 3 to 4 months of study, and not only it's just feasibility study. It has to be analyzed from legal, commercial, financial, so many other issues, and then we get to a structure analysis, and then only when we get the clearance on that, then we go to the bidding process. So the key lessons that we have learned so far is that while you structure a project, hear carefully what market says, because in the universe of PPP, the investors universe is very limited still now. Barring a few sectors like solar or maybe road sector, many other sectors, it is very difficult to get investors in PPP, because PPPs are still considered to be risky even by private sector. So you have to carefully understand their concern, and you have to address them in the contract. Similarly, you have to also manage expectations of public sector. Their obligations should be few, specific and measurable. So make sure that in the concession agreement, the role of public sector should be well defined. Maybe in many cases, their role should be to provide land, or maybe to provide some clearances and then make timely payments. Many part can be done by private sector, and just focus on the outcome. Payment security, I have already defined. The last but not the least is that it is still evolving. PPPs are still evolving, and there is a clear lack of capacity, which we have seen not only in public sector but also in private sector for many infrastructure sectors. I'm not talking about all. The conventional road or power, they are well established, but or maybe even transport also. But then there are social sectors or urban sectors. There we have to be really patient. You have to budget some time and resources for explaining the concept both to the government as well as to the private sector. Then only they will understand and participate in the project. So perseverance is the key. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we are coming to the conclusion of this plenary session. We now open the session for question and answer. Kindly use the microphone to direct the question, and do let us know who are you directing the question to. If you could also identify yourself, just say a few lines about yourself and direct the questions. Microphone, please.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Surendra Kalra, and I am a consultant for investments, foreign direct investments. Past 40 years I've been doing it. Now, my question is directly to Mr. Baldeo ji and Ashutosh ji. When we talk about investments in the PPP sector, one of the major analysis which your department only gives us on the website is that almost 62% of the FDI comes from the tax havens. Earlier, first was Mauritius. Now, for the past 2 years, it's Singapore. And the third is Cyprus. This structure, no other country has got it. China gets the maximum investment, but it is not at all through the tax havens like this. Second is that if you further analyze that financial structure, which is there on your website, that there is hardly any FDI coming from the GCC countries. Saudi Arabia itself has invested more than $42 billion outside their country, whereas not even single dollar has come from that country to our country. And GCC countries not even stand in the top 10 countries collectively in our FDI statistics. When you talk about you went to foreign countries, look at 3 states, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra. They were taking their delegations to other countries and they got the investments through the tax havens. Their statistics you can see there. If you would have changing your model, those things.
Can we
So
know
my
your
question is,
question? Yes.
my question is that even the London municipality has come out with 23 sukuk issues for their infrastructure developments, whereas now I'm talking to the GCC investments coming to India because they're looking at Sharia financing instruments. The Dr. Deepak Mohanty committee report of RBI has
Can you
recommended
please
for
tell
that
your
window.
question, please?
Why
Because
we are
we all
not
have to
looking
go.
at Sharia financing as an investment to the GCC countries?
Which financing?
Sharia financing.
I don't. I think we are not competent to answer. I mean, I am not competent to answer any of your question because first I fail to understand the question. See, what is the problem with FDI? I am not the competent person. Probably person who is dealing with FDI that can answer if there is any question. Sharia financing, etc. I don't think there is anything related to infrastructure. I would love to have
Sharia
questions
financing
on.
is mainly for infrastructure financing only.
So that
Probably
is
Pankaj ji
that,
can throw more light on that.
that is a larger concept. At least the infrastructure financing which I am dealing right now is concentrating on the regular financing instruments which are prevalent in the country and the world, and we are going to discuss that. If there is any question on infrastructure development and infrastructure financing, those questions are welcome.
Any questions? Yes. Could you just pass on the microphone?
Good afternoon, sirs. I'm Anurag Swarup from ONGC. So, under the PPP model, I just wanted to know that why sometimes the government is abused, that the contractors are allowed to recover the money on a long-term basis, even when especially the toll, they continue to recover the toll, even though they might have recovered the cost on a long-term basis. I mean, this is just a general question. I wanted to know about that.
You see, the TOT model which we are following, that is a model where the toll rate is decided by the government, and through a bidding, you are offering the value. It's a present payment of future cash revenues, and it's a risk. So it goes both ways. You may earn more than what you have anticipated. You may earn less than what you have anticipated. And to certain extent, that risk and the benefit or the loss coming out of it has to be borne by the concessionaire who is making those calculations. In addition to that, there are certain safeguards built into to either ensure that there is no super profit or there are no super losses. Okay. So this is the thing what is happening in TOT model. It's basically asset monetization model. Probably your question is more related to the thing which was prevalent earlier. That government is coming up with a road where 500 crore rupees has been taken to construct the road, and then they are putting a toll to get that money. And the toll was continuing even after that 500 crore rupees, uh, come to government. But those things are, relics of the past. Now, at least what is happening in government of India, that either you built a road in pure BOT model, but of late there are not many takers of BOT. So majority of roads are built in a HAM model. And after building in HAM model or even in EPC model, then you make a TOT effort where the roads are asset monetized and the future cash revenues you get right now through concession.
Sure. Any more questions? Okay.
Hello, my name is Vikram. My question is with IFC that has there been any investment into PPP projects that deal with climate change in India or globally?
Hello. So your question is that whether we would like to change anything in the project where we have invested? Yes, sorry, I couldn't hear your question. Yes. So we are quite active in investing in climate projects, particularly solar. So you may know that, 3 years ago, there was a big solar project which was commissioned in Riva in MP, where World Bank also provided some financing support for evacuation infrastructure, and we provided the transaction advisory support, and IFC eventually made investments in those projects. So climate change remains one of our priority sector. This is one. Then we have several projects in affordable housing, green affordable housing sector, water sector projects. So there are so many sectors. So it is a priority for us.
If I may just add to this, see, a lot of the projects now are, say, 1.5 degrees proof now. So a lot of the projects, infrastructure projects, are being developed in such a way that they are climate proof and they are climate resilience. And say compressed biogas project that we are actually handling across a number of municipalities in Tamil Nadu, they are all of this nature and climate risk, climate financed on that basis. We attract climate finance from overseas for implementing these projects. The Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation is actually facilitating this kind of.
Thank you so much, dignitaries. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, so wonderfully participating. With that, we're coming to the conclusion of this session. May I request the chairperson of the session to kindly give the concluding remarks?
Thank you.
Almost you have taken my 2 hours.
So we'll take 2 minutes to give them a minute.
So thank you very much. I think a lot of things have been told about PPP, private participation in infrastructure. And you might have observed that it is still an unending, topic. Everyone, 4 of us talked about different things, but still a lot of things have been left out. But the crux of the matter is that, as told by, Mr. Ashutosh, Rajasthan tried to get various projects initially, but they failed. What could be the reason? Any guess? Faith of the investors. See, investors require a kind of policy stability. They require kind of faith in the systems. That if I am going to invest today, the policy tomorrow will not change. There is a past history of good deals given by this state government. There is a history of successful projects taken over by this state government, and so for center also. And that faith comes from experience and from the policy stability and the framework. So framework creation is very important. And for India, you would be happy to know that institutions after institutions has reported that India's PPP framework is one of the best in the world. Whether it's a World Bank report, ADB report, BIMSTEC report, any report you take, they put India's PPP framework in top 3 or top 4. That is there. But at the same time, state governments need to have their own PPP policy, their own framework. And probably what Rajasthan is doing, many states already do have their policies. Karnataka is having their policy. Gujarat is having PPP policy. Andhra is having PPP policy. Odisha is having PPP policy. States are coming up with their policies and policy stability. That is one. Number two, as told by Pankaj, that the structuring of the project is very, very critical. Because the structuring and the risk allocation and the KPIs, these are, most important factors of success of any PPP. And if you have not applied your mind to decide what KPIs you are going to monitor, for example, if you are going to make a hospital in PPP mode and you have kept number of knee operations as a KPI, what will you get? What will you get out of this project? Any answer? A large number of knee operations. Because ultimately, if the remuneration or the payment to the concessionaire depends on how many knee operations he performs, then whether there is a requirement or not, he will do a knee operation to every patient and come up with the bill that, look, in this financial year I have done 10,000 knee operations. So what you want to achieve through a PPP project is very important, and that understanding is not there. Therefore, capacity building is required. So you decide your KPIs very diligently, because that is going to give you the result. If you select bad KPIs, even if everything is correct, you will not get the desired result. Then risk allocation. If the risk allocation is lopsided, no bidder is going to come. As Palash has shown in his water sector, projects. Who runs water sector projects? Mainly in urban areas, municipal bodies. And municipal bodies have their own political dynamics. If you put burden of, for example, the risk of rate determination or revenue collection to the concessionaire, probably the project is going to fail. Because there would be a continuous tussle between the municipal corporation and the concessionaire about what rate of water supply should be, and from where you have to collect, from where not to collect, where to give free water, where not to give free water. So when you are making a project, risk allocation is very important. You want to run, say, bus services in a urban area, and you put the revenue risk on the concessionaire, the project is not going to be a successful one. No municipal corporation will allow you to make, tariff as per financial requirement. Probably there would be some, dynamics play here and there, and they will force you to keep down the tariff. So these are the things. So there is no recipe, there is no Ramban, there is no one fit all recipe for PPP. What has been successful in one area may not be successful in another area. What has been successful in one sector may not be successful for other sector. Therefore, every sector has its own concession agreement. Every sector has its own identified risk of KPI, risk allocation, own list of KPIs. an own way of making what is the bidding parameter. That is one thing, again, very important. Generally, what is happening that when we make a PPP project, we try to fleece out concessionaire at every point. अच्छा, ये भी पॉइंट है, यहाँ भी इससे ये रेवेन्यू स्ट्रीम सरकार को आ सकती है, वो भी पॉइंट है, वहां से इससे ये रेवेन्यू स्ट्रीम सरकार को आ सकती है. So generally in PPP, land has to be provided at concession. But there are many PPP projects and departments and agencies who, when giving the land, they will inbuilt a charge, very high lease rate for land. And we continuously discuss with all such agencies that, look, if you want to be, coming up with a successful PPP project, don't charge concessionaire at every possible point. Give them things and try to get the value of your project probably at one place. Make a good bidding parameter through which you can get the value of that project, rather than fleecing them at every point. So there are many issues, but I'm hopeful that today's presentation might have given you some glimpses of what we are doing, what is the future, what are the difficulties, what are the challenges and probable solutions. And I'm hopeful that in coming years, with the collective efforts of Government of India and states, we will come up with a system where we will invite and we will attract more private participation in infrastructure in terms of PPP as well as in terms of pure private investment as well. So with that, I come to close. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson of the session, so wonderfully concluding the session. May I request you, sir, to kindly present mementos to our speakers. We would like to present our memento to Mr. Palash Srivastava. May I request Mr. Baldeo Purushartha to kindly present the mementos. We're presenting a memento to Mr. Palash Srivastava. Sir. We're presenting a memento to Mr. Pankaj Sinha. Present a memento to Mr. Ashutosh Vajpeyi.